I remember the smell before anything else. Not smoke, not ash paper, burnt paper. That dry, bitter scent that clings to your clothes and refuses to fade. It was the morning after the Great Raid, March 10th, 1945. Tokyo was still smoldering. The sky, once blue, had turned the color of steel. We were told to search the ruins for survivors, but most of us knew what we'd really find. I was 22 then, part of a volunteer rescue team. We carried stretchers and shovels, but mostly we carried silence. No one spoke unless they had to. The sound of boots in soot was enough. Somewhere near Koto Ward, between what had been a row of homes, I saw a shape that didn't belong. Not twisted metal, not brick. Paper curled and grey at the edges, but still whole. When I picked it up, a breeze lifted the top corner, and I saw what was drawn there. A sky. A perfect sky, made of pencil and faint blue crayon. No planes, no fire. Just clouds and birds, drawn by a child's hand. I turned it over. On the back, written in careful hiragana, was a single line. The sky is big today. That's all. No name, no age. But I would later learn who she was and how her picture outlived her. They said she finished the drawing the night before the sirens. Her mother had saved it on the table, waiting for her to come home from school. When the raid began, the family ran for the river. She never made it. And yet, somehow, her sky did. I kept that page. I still have it framed, fragile. The last blue left from that night. What I want to tell you now isn't only about her. It's about the world that disappeared around her, and how one child's simple picture became a voice louder than the bombs that took her life. If stories like this move you, consider subscribing. It helps keep these human memories alive, so the next generation never forgets what war takes from children. When I look at her drawing, I still wonder what she saw when she looked up that afternoon. Before the sirens, before the fire, when Tokyo still had its sky. I remember Tokyo before the smoke, when mornings were slow and ordinary, and the air still carried the smell of rice and soap, not ash. The war had already taken so much, but somehow children still found ways to pretend it hadn't reached them yet. The girl whose drawing I found lived somewhere near Sumida River. Her name was Aya, I later learned. 7 years old. Her father worked at a factory that made engine parts for the army, and her mother volunteered at the neighborhood ration center. But Aya, she was too young to understand what war work meant. She only cared about the sky. Every afternoon, she'd sit outside with her notebook and a box of colored pencils, sketching the clouds above their wooden home. Neighbors said she'd talk to the birds as if they could hear her. When the wind blew dust into her eyes, she'd blink and keep drawing. Children have a strange gift. They can live beside danger and still believe the world is kind. Tokyo was changing fast by then. Windows were taped to prevent shattering. Fire buckets lined the streets. Sirens tested their wails almost daily. But in Aya's drawings, the sky never cracked. It was always soft blue pencil, a circle of sun, 2 little clouds shaped like rabbits. Her teacher once asked the class to draw the future. Most children sketched soldiers, planes, or flags. Aya drew a field of flowers under the biggest sky she could fit on the page. When asked why, she said quietly, "Because the sky doesn't belong to anyone." That answer stayed with me. It was simple, maybe even childish, but it carried more truth than any speech I heard in those days. Her mother later told a journalist that Aya spent hours redrawing the same sky. Sometimes she'd erase parts again and again, trying to make it perfect. That's why there was a faint grey mark on the final picture where she tried to erase something, a plane, maybe, or a thought she didn't want to see. I like to think that, in her mind, the world above was still safe, that the sky she drew was real to her, and that, even for a moment, she believed it would stay that way. But that same sky would soon turn red. The next night, the sirens came, and for the first time, the sky she loved answered back with fire. It was March 9th, 1945. The day began almost like any other. Children were walking home from school, carrying their lunch tins. Factory whistles marked the end of a shift. Somewhere near Ueno, someone was playing a shamisen by an open window. Tokyo didn't know it yet, but this would be the last quiet evening the city ever heard. I was stationed near Kamedo that night, helping with supply transport. At dusk, the sky glowed orange, the kind of sunset that hides its warning. Aya would have been home, maybe finishing another sketch. Her mother said later that she'd asked to stay up a little longer to draw the night clouds. Then came the first sound. Not thunder, not engines, sirens. A single wail at first, faint, uncertain, then another, then a dozen more, until the entire city was howling. That sound cut through everything. Conversation, prayer, even thought. People froze mid-step. Mothers grabbed children by the arms. Windows were thrown open, lights shut off, doors slammed. It was the sound that turned the sky from something you admired into something you feared. Aya's family ran for the shelter behind the house, a small pit lined with wood. Her mother said Aya clutched her drawing book to her chest. When told to leave it, she whispered, "I can't. It's still missing one cloud." The mother didn't argue. She let her bring it. Above them, the sirens faded into the hum of engines. At first, distant, then closer. You could feel the vibration before you could see the light. That deep, physical hum of 100 bombers crossing the bay. The sky that Aya once drew open and endless was now covered by black dots growing larger with each second. Searchlights swept across the clouds like silver knives. And then the air raid warden's whistles began, short, sharp bursts that meant only one thing: take cover. I remember standing on a roof, watching the first flares descend. They floated slowly, like fireflies, lighting the city below in pale white light, beautiful for one impossible moment. Then came the roar, the low, rolling sound that turned into something beyond sound, beyond comprehension. The first bombs fell over the eastern wards. Rows of houses vanished into sparks. The air itself turned to fire. Somewhere beneath that burning sky, Aya's shelter shook. Her mother told rescuers later that the child covered her ears and whispered, "It's just thunder, Mama. It's just thunder." But it wasn't thunder. It was Tokyo tearing itself apart. The night had only just begun. By dawn, more than 100,000 were gone, and in the ruins, among the ashes and silence, I found her sky. When the sun finally rose, Tokyo no longer looked like a city. It looked like a desert of ash. The raid had lasted less than 3 hours, but in that time, nearly 100,000 lives had vanished, and everything they loved, their homes, their streets, their memories, had burned with them. We walked through neighborhoods we no longer recognized. Streets had no names now, only directions of wind. The air was thick with dust that fell like snow. Even our footsteps sounded hollow, as if the ground beneath us was still grieving. I remember a row of metal pots lined neatly beside what had been a kitchen wall, a pair of sandals half buried in soot, and then the smell again, burnt paper. It was under what remained of a small wooden house. A corner of the paper had curled, but somehow it had survived the flames. I bent down, brushed away the ash, and lifted it free. A child's drawing. The lines were faint but clear: the sky, the clouds, 2 small birds. There was no fire, no war, only peace. I didn't know whose it was then, but something about the page felt alive, as if it refused to accept what had happened. When I turned it over, I saw the faint imprint of another pencil mark, barely visible through the soot. A circle, a Sunday drawn with a steady hand, not rushed, not fearful. That detail broke me more than anything else I saw that day. Later, when we found a woman from that household, Aya's mother, she told us her daughter had been drawing the night before. She had been sitting by the window when the sirens began. When they ran for the shelter, Aya had clutched her notebook. The mother had tried to pull her along faster, but the smoke came too quickly. She lost her grip. By the time she reached the river, the fire was everywhere. She said she called her daughter's name until her voice gave out, and then there was silence. She never found her child. But when I showed her the page, her hands trembled. She didn't cry, not at first. She just pressed it to her chest and whispered. She finished it. I couldn't speak. What could you possibly say to a mother holding the last trace of her child's imagination? It struck me then how fragile memory is, how something as small as a piece of paper can carry more weight than 1,000 monuments. In that one page lived everything the war had tried to erase: laughter, color, innocence. I asked the mother what Aya used to say when she drew. She smiled faintly. She said the sky is where people go when they have nowhere else to live. That night, when I went home, I wrapped the drawing in cloth and hid it under my cot. Not because it was evidence, but because it felt sacred, like a promise that the world could be kind again. But even promises burn, and that night, Tokyo's sky turned into the very thing she had tried to erase. That night, I couldn't sleep. The city was still glowing, not from lights, but from embers. From the window of the makeshift relief station, I could see the horizon flickering red. Every gust of wind carried sparks across the river, as if the sky itself were trying to finish what the bombs had started. When I closed my eyes, I could still hear the sound, the deep, endless roar that didn't fade, even after the planes had gone. It was like the earth was still breathing through smoke. I kept thinking about Aya's drawing, the quiet sky, the little birds, that perfect circle of Sunday. I placed it beside me on the table, and under the candlelight, I imagined the two skies together, hers and mine. They couldn't have been more different. Her sky was clean, full of space and light. The one outside was heavy, black, and alive with falling ash. The same city, the same air, two completely different worlds. It's strange how quickly the sky can turn from a dream to a weapon. We had known the B-29 seconds were coming. The Americans had begun firebombing smaller cities weeks earlier: Nagoya, Kobe, Osaka. But no one believed Tokyo, the heart of Japan, could be erased in one night. Not like this. Each plane carried incendiaries, small, lightweight, designed not to explode, but to burn. The first wave dropped flares to mark the grid. The second wave dropped the fire. By the third, there was no need. The flames themselves had become the markers. The fire moved faster than any soldier could. It ran through alleys, climbed telephone wires, leapt across canals. People tried to outrun it, but the fire didn't run. It flew. The wind turned into a storm. It picked up roofs, doors, even people, and pulled them back into the blaze. I saw a man trying to carry a child across the street. The fire caught the ground in front of him, not from above, but from beneath. He froze, turned, and disappeared into the smoke. No sky should ever hold such things. The sound that night was something no one could describe, a mixture of screaming wind and cracking wood, and beneath it 1,000 smaller sounds, whispers, prayers, the sound of sandals slapping wet pavement, and then silence. There were moments, only seconds at a time, when the fire paused and the world went still. In that stillness, the only thing you could hear was the distant hum of more engines, the next wave, already coming. When the bombers finally turned back toward the sea, Tokyo was gone. The fires would burn for 2 more days, and the sky would stay the color of rust for a week. I looked again at Aya's drawing the next morning. The pencil lines had smudged from my hands, but the sky was still there, faint, soft, untouched. That contrast haunted me. How a child could draw the same sky that destroyed her. I realized something then. The bombs had taken lives, yes, but they had also taken stories, thousands of them. Little dreams, tiny drawings, secrets whispered before sleep, all gone, swallowed by the same wind that fed the flames. And that's what war really is, not just the loss of people, but the loss of what they imagined the world could be. Yet even among the ruins, something survived, not just a drawing, but the idea that beauty could outlast the fire. Weeks passed, but Tokyo never truly went quiet. There were no birds, no laughter, only the crackle of fires still smouldering beneath collapsed roofs. The air carried a scent of metal and rain, the kind that clings to your skin and never leaves. I stayed to help with recovery work. We rebuilt water lines, cleared rubble, and searched for the missing. Every day, I found something that reminded me of how much the city had lost: a shoe, a teacup, a photograph turned to ash. And every night, I returned to that one drawing. By then, I had shown it to several relief officers. They told me to hand it over to the archives, but I couldn't. It didn't belong in a file. It belonged to the people. So I started showing it quietly to mothers at the food line, to children who had lost their homes. They would touch the page carefully, as if it might crumble in their hands. One woman began to cry. She said, "My son used to draw skies like that. Before the war, he said he wanted to fly, not to fight, just to see the clouds." It was then I understood. The drawing wasn't just Aya's. It was every child's, every innocent world that war had taken. A few months later, a local teacher asked to borrow the picture for her classroom. She said she wanted her students to see what peace used to look like. When I visited the class, the children sat in silence around it. None of them spoke, but one little boy reached out his finger and traced the line of the sun and whispered, "It's warm." That moment changed me, because in that small classroom, surrounded by children who had lost everything, Aya's drawing became more than a relic. It became a kind of prayer. The teacher hung it above the blackboard, and every morning she began her lesson with the same words: "Remember, the sky belongs to everyone." Over the years, the paper faded. The blue became grey. But even now, when I look at it, I can still feel that warmth, not from the fire that destroyed the city, but from the small hand that once believed the world could be beautiful. That's what I've come to believe about memory. It isn't about what survives, but what refuses to disappear. If this moment of courage and remembrance moves you, share this video. Every share helps keep the voices of lost children alive, so their skies are never forgotten. Somewhere in a museum now, behind glass, that same picture hangs. Visitors pass by quietly, some for only a few seconds. But those who stop, those who really look, often raise their eyes afterward, as if checking whether the real sky outside still belongs to them. And maybe that's what Aya wanted all along, not to be remembered, but to remind us to look up. Time has a strange way of softening memory, but not this one. Decades have passed since that night, yet I still see her sky as clearly as the morning I found it. Sometimes, when I walk past the Peace Museum where it now hangs, I stop at the corner before going inside. I like to watch people's faces as they approach the frame. Most come in quietly, their eyes tired from the photographs and statistics that line the walls. But when they reach her drawing, something changes. Their shoulders ease, their eyes lift. They look up just as she once did. You can always tell the moment they notice the handwriting on the back, those small hiragana letters. The sky is big today. Some smile through tears. Others just nod and stand a little longer than they planned. That's the power of a child's silence. It doesn't shout. It doesn't accuse. It simply waits until you're ready to listen. For years, I tried to understand why this single page endured when everything else burned. The firestorm that night reached temperatures hotter than metal, melting entire blocks of homes into rivers of glass. Nothing else survived. And yet, this one fragile paper, thinner than a leaf, made it through. Some said it was chance, some said it was fate, but I think it was purpose. Because the sky she drew wasn't meant to be seen only by her. It was meant to outlive her, to remind us all of what we lose when we stop seeing beauty above us. Each year, on March 10th, survivors gather in Tokyo to ring a bell for the lost. Children from nearby schools place flowers at the memorial. And before they leave, many visit the small frame in the corner, the one with the drawing of the sky. They bow quietly. Some whisper, "Thank you." Some leave folded paper cranes. It's strange, isn't it, that a war fought with such noise, planes, bombs, sirens, screams, should leave behind its most lasting echo in silence. But maybe that's what Aya gave the world, a silence that speaks, a silence that says, "Remember," that says, "Look up," that says, "Never again." I sometimes wonder if she knew that her small picture would survive her, that her little line of pencil would become a symbol for peace. Probably not. Children don't draw to be remembered. They draw because they still believe the world will see what they see. And through her, we still can. She drew a sky before the sirens, and in doing so, gave us one to return to. Sometimes I still dream of that night, the sirens, the wind, the red sky over Tokyo. But in the dream, it always ends differently. The fire never comes. The sky stays blue, just as she drew it. And somewhere in that stillness, a small hand keeps coloring, refusing to stop. I keep her drawing near my window now. The paper is brittle, its corners cracked. But every morning, when sunlight hits it just right, the blue still shines faintly. It's almost as if the sky itself remembers her. When visitors ask me why I kept it all these years, I tell them it's because I needed to remember what peace looks like, not in speeches, not in flags, but in the hand of a child who never learned how to hate. War ends in treaties, but peace begins with people like her, with crayons, with hope, with the quiet belief that the world can be kind again. Sometimes, when I see school children drawing outside the museum, I think of her the way she must have squinted against the sun, the way she tried to make the sky big enough to hold everything she loved. And I wonder if she'd be proud to know that her small sky became the one so many people still look up to. Because that's what remembrance really is. Not grief, not guilt, but gratitude. Gratitude that her hand once held a pencil instead of fear. Gratitude that we can still see what she saw. Every March 10th, when the bells ring for those who were lost, I step outside and look up. Sometimes the clouds drift exactly like the ones she drew. And in that moment, I swear I can hear her voice soft, almost carried by the wind, saying, "The sky is big today. If you believe these stories must never fade, subscribe and join us. Together, we'll keep the echoes of peace alive, one human story at a time." The world called it a war. Tokyo called it a tragedy. But for one little girl, it was simply the day the sky fell silent and the day her drawing began to speak for her. She drew the sky before the sirens, and through that sky she still speaks.